She smelled like the streets. Unwashed hair, layers of thrift store clothing, and a sleeping bag that had seen better days. Most people walking past the woman under the I-25 overpass in Denver wouldn't give her a second glance. Sarah Chen preferred it that way. At 41, she'd mastered the art of being invisible. Not the tactical invisibility they'd taught her in boot/training, but the kind that came from society deciding you no longer mattered. The young business professionals hurrying to their downtown offices didn't notice the Navy SEAL trident tattoo hidden beneath her dirty sleeve. They didn't notice the way her eyes still tracked every person who passed within 20 feet. Combat habits die hard, even when you're living under a bridge. What they definitely didn't notice was the medical kit buried at the bottom of her backpack. The one she'd carried through 3 deployments, the one she'd sworn she'd never need again. They were wrong about that. The cardboard sign read, "Homeless vet. Anything helps. God bless." Sarah had stopped writing the full truth weeks ago. Nobody wanted to read Navy SEAL Combat Medic. 3 Purple Hearts. Can't afford rent because VA claims still pending after 14 months. The sign was shorter now, simpler, less likely to start conversations she couldn't finish without breaking down. Officer Mike Brennan's voice cut through the cold morning air. "Move along, lady, this isn't a homeless shelter." He towered over her, hand resting on his belt. Sarah didn't argue. She just gathered her worn military-issue sleeping bag and moved on, like she had done every morning for the past 8 months. The young cop had no idea that the crazy homeless woman he was dismissing had once pulled 3 Marines out of a burning Humvee in Fallujah while under enemy fire, but he was about to find out. Sarah's hands rested in her lap as she repositioned at her usual corner outside Union Station. Medic's hands. Hands that had tied tourniquets, sutured wounds, and held dying men while whispering, "You're going home." Those same hands now held an empty coffee cup, hoping for spare change. A businessman dropped $1 without looking at her face. A woman with a yoga mat deliberately crossed to the other side of the street. A teenager muttered, "Get a job," loud enough for Sarah to hear. She said nothing. Combat had taught her when to engage and when to conserve energy. But what none of them knew was that sitting before them was a woman who had once been declared tactically essential by SEAL Team 3. A woman whose hands had performed a field thoracotomy in a sandstorm. A woman who had received a handwritten commendation from a 3-star general. They saw trash. They should have seen treasure. Hidden beneath her dirty jacket was the truth she tried to bury every day. The scars from Ramadi and Kandahar. The muscle memory that still woke her at 0500 hours even though she had nowhere to report. Inside her backpack, buried beneath spare clothes and granola bars, was her individual first aid kit, the same one she'd carried through 3 deployments. She'd told herself 100 times to sell it, but her hands wouldn't let go. Medics don't retire. They just stop having patience. 8 months. That's how long Sarah had been fighting the VA. The paperwork filed and lost. 3 times. The months of waiting. The phone calls that went unreturned. The slow erosion of everything she'd built after leaving the military. She'd had an apartment for a while, but without income or benefits, the rent became impossible. Then came the shelters, crowded with well-meaning volunteers who wanted to hear her story, to help her. But Sarah's PTSD made crowded spaces unbearable, so she'd found her way to the overpass, alone, invisible, surviving. Why don't they just get jobs? She heard Brennan mutter to his partner as they walked away. My tax dollars are paying for their choices. Sarah's jaw clenched. 4 counts in, 4 counts hold, 4 counts out. Controlled breathing under stress, just like diving. What she didn't know was that walking down 17th Street at that very moment was someone who would change everything. Someone who would recognize her. Someone who remembered exactly who Sarah Chen used to be. Lieutenant Marcus Rivera stopped mid-stride outside the Starbucks, his grande coffee frozen halfway to his mouth. The homeless woman sitting against the Wells Fargo building had her head down, but something about her posture triggered every alarm in his SEAL training. Back to the wall. Clear sight lines, backpack positioned for rapid access, hands visible but ready. It was a defensive position, a military defensive position. Marcus took 3 steps closer and saw the edge of it beneath her dirty sleeve. Faded, sun-damaged, but unmistakable. The Navy SEAL trident tattoo. His coffee hit the pavement. Chen. His voice came out barely above a whisper. Petty Officer Sarah Chen. The woman's head snapped up with the speed of someone whose combat reflexes hadn't dulled despite months on the streets. Her eyes locked onto Marcus, and he saw recognition flash across her face before her expression went carefully neutral. Those eyes. He'd seen those eyes calm a panicking Marine with a sucking chest wound. He'd seen those eyes at his Purple Heart ceremony after she'd pulled him out of a burning vehicle in Ramadi, and she was homeless. "You have the wrong person," Sarah said quietly, pulling her sleeve down to cover the tattoo. But Marcus knew better. He'd been in Ramadi when she'd saved his life. "What happened to you, Sarah?" She didn't answer. She just looked past him at something down the block, her body language shifting in a way that made Marcus's training flare to life. "Marcus," she said, voice suddenly sharp and focused. "That man in the red jacket. 50 yards, left hand in his coat, wrong weight distribution. Do you see him?" Marcus turned slowly. He saw him, and in that moment, he realized that Sarah Chen might be homeless. She might be broken, but she was still every bit the SEAL combat medic who'd saved his life. They were going to need that. The man in the red jacket was moving through the crowd with purpose, but his left side rode low, asymmetric weight distribution. Concealed carry. His hand remained in his jacket pocket, fingers curled around something. His eyes kept returning to a specific woman in a blue dress, approximately 15 meters ahead. Classic stalking behavior. Active shooter profile, Sarah said quietly. "He's identified his target." Marcus felt his blood run cold. Sarah was right, but before he could move, Sarah was already standing. For 8 months, she'd been invisible. But invisibility cuts both ways. Because when you're invisible, you see everything others miss. And right now, every instinct she'd honed over 3 deployments was screaming that the man in the red jacket was about to kill someone. "Doc, you can't." Marcus began. Sarah was already moving. She'd spent 8 months being dismissed, ignored, and treated like human garbage. But garbage has one advantage: nobody pays attention to it until it's too late. Sarah closed the distance with fluid efficiency, her hand collecting an empty glass bottle from a trash bin. Improvised weapon, zero signature. The man never saw her coming. To him, she was just another homeless person, beneath notice and beneath threat assessment. That was his mistake. "Excuse me, sir," Sarah said, voice carrying that particular pitch of confused homeless person. "You got any spare?" The man turned slightly, irritated, hand still in his pocket. It was the opening Sarah needed. Her left hand shot out, controlling his gun hand through fabric. Her right hand came up with the bottle for visual distraction. Her foot swept his ankle. Body weight, leverage, control the weapon, neutralize the threat. The man went down hard. The gun clattered free. And suddenly, Sarah Chen wasn't invisible anymore. The scream came first. Then chaos. People scattered. Someone shouted, "She's got a gun!" Even though Sarah had immediately kicked the weapon away, Marcus was there in seconds, controlling the suspect. "Stay down. Do not move." A security guard rushed over, hand on his weapon. "Back away from him. Both of you, hands where I can see them." "He had a gun," Marcus said calmly, hands raised. "We're both military. We neutralized an active threat." The guard's eyes flicked to Marcus, clean, well-dressed, clearly not homeless, and then back to Sarah. The calculation was obvious and ugly. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step aside," the guard said. "Ma'am, turn around and place your hands behind your back." This was the moment Sarah had feared, where being right didn't matter, where saving a life didn't matter. But as handcuffs appeared, something unexpected happened. "Wait." A young woman pushed through the crowd, phone in hand. "I was recording and caught everything. That guy was absolutely going after someone. And she." The woman pointed at Sarah, eyes wide. She moved like an action movie. That wasn't random. That was training. Officer Brennan arrived, the same cop who'd moved Sarah along that morning. His expression shifted from professional concern to recognition to barely concealed disgust. "You again." But then he watched the video. 3 times. When he looked back at Sarah, something had changed. Not respect, not yet, but doubt. Within minutes, the video was everywhere. At TikTok, Tracy's "homeless woman takes down armed man" went viral. By the time more police units arrived, the video had 50,000 views, and people weren't seeing a homeless woman anymore. They were seeing something else. "Did you see how she moved?" someone whispered. "That was military." Marcus made a decision. "Her name is Sarah Chen," he said to the reporter who'd appeared. "Petty officer, first class. Navy SEAL combat medic, 3 Purple Hearts. And she's been homeless for 8 months because the VA lost her paperwork and nobody cared enough to fix it." The words hung in the air like an indictment. This wasn't just a dramatic takedown anymore. This was a story about failure. A new voice cut through the crowd. Everyone step back. Give her space. Sarah's head snapped up. She knew that voice. Command voice. Officer voice. Team voice. Master Chief Roberto Vasquez pushed through the crowd, his Navy service uniform standing out sharply. He stopped 3 feet from Sarah. "Doc," he said quietly, "is what Lieutenant Rivera just said true? Have you been on the streets for 8 months?" Sarah met her former commanding officer's eyes. "Yes, Master Chief." Vasquez's jaw clenched. "And when were you planning to inform someone from your old unit?" "Never, Master Chief. It's not your problem." "The hell it isn't." He turned to Brennan. "Is she being charged?" "Based on video evidence, she acted in defense of others. The suspect had a loaded firearm and a restraining order. She's free to go." Vasquez looked back at Sarah. "You're coming with me, Doc. You think you can just fall off the grid and your brothers and sisters won't notice? You saved lives in Ramadi, Kandahar, Helmand. You earned those Purple Hearts, and you think we'd just let you live on the streets?" Sarah felt something breaking inside her chest. "I didn't want anyone to see me like this." "Too late," Vasquez said, gesturing to the crowd. "The cameras, the phones, the whole damn country is about to see you. So we might as well make sure they see the truth." By sunset, Sarah Chen's story would be on every news channel. By midnight, veterans groups would be demanding VA investigations. By morning, congressional offices would be flooded with calls. But right now, sitting on that curb with her old team leader refusing to let her disappear again, Sarah Chen felt something she hadn't felt in 8 months. She felt like she might be worth saving after all. By 6 p.m., the story was everywhere. Navy SEAL combat medic lives on Denver streets despite decorated service trended on every platform. The TikTok had 2 million views. Even celebrities were weighing in. Sarah sat in a hotel room that Vasquez had paid for, watching her life become public property. "You should eat something," Marcus said, gesturing to room service. Real food. Her stomach had shrunk so much that looking at it made her nauseous. A knock on the door. Vasquez entered, followed by 2 people Sarah didn't recognize. "Sarah, this is Congressman Michael Torres. He chairs the House Veterans Affairs Committee. And this is Lieutenant Commander Jessica Park, Navy JAG." Torres spoke gently. "I'm here because what happened to you is exactly the kind of systemic failure my committee has been investigating for years." Commander Park added, "And I'm here to make sure it never happens again." Sarah shook her head. "Stuff like this happens all the time. Why is everyone suddenly paying attention to me?" "Because you stopped being invisible," Torres said simply. "That video showed the country something they needed to see." He showed her social media compilations. Veterans sharing their own VA horror stories, civilians expressing outrage. Find her paperwork trending. "Your story has created political capital we can actually use," Torres continued. But before Sarah could respond, her phone rang. Virginia area code. Marcus answered on speaker. "This is Admiral Patricia Morrison, Commander, Naval Special Warfare Command. I need to speak with Petty Officer Chen immediately." The room went silent. An admiral, calling her personally. "Petty Officer Chen." The admiral's voice carried command authority even through the tiny speaker. "What I saw today was impressive and infuriating. Impressive because you demonstrated exactly the skills we train. Infuriating because you shouldn't have been in that position. I've spent 6 hours on calls with the VA secretary, your chain of command, and angry Congress members who want to know how one of my combat medics ended up homeless." The admiral asked pointed questions. When Sarah first filed, when the VA informed her paperwork was lost. Then came the revelation that made Sarah's hands shake. "Your paperwork wasn't lost. It was flagged for additional review because someone thought your injuries weren't severe enough despite 3 Purple Hearts. Your case has been sitting in administrative limbo while you lived on the streets. Not lost. Deliberately delayed. That's unacceptable," Morrison said coldly. "And heads will roll. You are still a member of Naval Special Warfare. We do not leave our people behind. Master Chief Vasquez, here's what's happening. Petty Officer Chen is being placed on full medical leave, retroactive to discharge. All back pay and benefits processed immediately. And I'm personally overseeing it. Emergency housing and health care, effective now." Sarah felt tears burning. 14 months of fighting, of being told to fill out one more form, and now an admiral was personally intervening. Furthermore, Morrison continued, "If interested, There's a position at Naval Special Warfare Center. We need experienced instructors for combat medicine. Someone who's been in the fight. Ma'am, I'm not sure I'm in any condition. I'm not asking you to decide now. I'm asking you to heal, get back on your feet, and remember who you were before the system broke you. Then decide if you want to serve again. But either way, you're getting the benefits you earned. Are we clear? Crystal clear, ma'am. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Thank me when every veteran in your situation gets the same treatment. The line went dead. Did that just happen? That just happened. Marcus confirmed. Welcome back to the land of the living, Doc. Detective Linda Zhao arrived with news that tied everything together. Miss Chen, I need to understand how you identified the threat. Sarah walked her through it. The subject's left side rode low. Asymmetric weight distribution. Hand remained in pocket. Eyes kept returning to specific woman. Classic stalking behavior. His breathing was elevated, jaw clenched, pupils dilated. Physiological markers of someone preparing to act violently. Zhao nodded, making notes. James Carver, age 34. Restraining order, filed by Amanda Morrison, the woman in blue. He'd threatened her at her workplace. She's a family law attorney who handled his divorce. So I was right. According to his phone messages, yes. He'd been planning it for days. You intervened 30 seconds before he was going to pull the gun. Joe showed her security footage. You've been sitting on that corner for weeks. Carver walked past you at least 6 times, surveilling Morrison. He saw you but dismissed you. That invisibility gave you the perfect vantage point. She wasn't just a witness, Marcus said. She was an accidental surveillance operator. Joe pulled out her phone. This is Amanda Morrison with her 2 daughters, ages 8 and 6. They still have their mother because you were there. Sarah stared at the photo. Smiling woman with 2 children. Miss Morrison wants to meet you. She's waiting downstairs. Amanda Morrison was younger than expected, maybe 35, with tired eyes suggesting she'd been carrying fear for a long time. Miss Chen, she said, voice breaking. I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to. I just did what anyone would do. No, Amanda shook her head firmly. Most people wouldn't have noticed. Most wouldn't have cared. Most definitely wouldn't have intervened. She showed Sarah photos of her daughters. These are Sophie and Emma. They still have a mother, because you were there. She paused. 3 weeks ago, I filed that restraining order. Police told me they couldn't do anything until he actually did something. That I should be careful. I'm a family law attorney. I make good money, have resources, and even I couldn't get protection. The system failed me just like it failed you. I saw the news about your situation, about the VA, about being homeless, and I keep thinking that if the system had worked for you, if you'd had housing, you wouldn't have been on that corner, and I'd be dead. Don't do that, Sarah said. Don't make my suffering into some twisted silver lining. I'm not. I'm saying you being there saved me, and now I'm going to make damn sure you never have to be there again. Amanda pulled out a business card. I specialize in disability and veterans' rights law. I'm taking your case pro bono. We're going to make sure you get every cent the VA owes you, plus compensation for damages. Sarah stared at the card. You don't have to do that. Yes, I do, because you saved my life, and this is the only way I know how to save yours. The 2 women stood in that lobby, 2 people who should never have intersected, brought together by system failures and split-second decisions. Sarah began to understand that maybe her invisibility hadn't been meaningless. Maybe her suffering had put her in exactly the right place at exactly the right time. 3 weeks later, Sarah stood in front of a congressional hearing, wearing a clean Navy uniform that Vasquez had helped her get fitted. You don't have to do this, Marcus had said, but Sarah disagreed. If her story could prevent even one other veteran from ending up on the streets, it was worth it. Congressman Torres opened. Today we examine how a decorated Navy SEAL combat medic with 3 Purple Hearts ended up homeless for 8 months while waiting for benefits that were deliberately delayed. For 3 hours, Sarah testified. The paperwork filed and lost. The months of waiting, the slow erosion. She spoke calmly, factually, without drama. The emotion came from committee members. Let me understand, Senator Williams said, voice shaking with anger. You saved lives in combat, earned 3 Purple Hearts, were medically discharged with commendations. And then the VA flagged your case because someone decided your injuries weren't severe enough. That's correct, Senator. And during 8 months homeless, what medical care did you receive? None, ma'am. I couldn't afford it. Senator Williams looked at VA representatives. How do you explain letting a decorated combat medic live under a bridge? The VA offered careful bureaucratic answers about processing delays and documentation requirements, but this time, there were consequences. Within a week, 3 senior VA administrators were placed on leave. The VA secretary announced immediate reforms. Amanda Morrison's legal team filed a class action lawsuit with Sarah as lead plaintiff. Over 15,000 cases might qualify. Admiral Morrison personally oversaw creation of a new rapid response program for veterans in crisis, with direct lines bypassing bureaucracy. You started a revolution, Doc, Vasquez told her. Sarah wasn't sure how she felt about that. She hadn't set out to change the system. She'd just been trying to survive. 6 months after the incident on 16th Street, Sarah Chen stood in front of a classroom at the Naval Special Warfare Center, watching 20 nervous SEAL candidates file in for Combat Medicine 101. She'd accepted Morrison's offer to teach, though it had taken months of therapy before she felt ready. The VA had finally processed her benefits with full back pay. Amanda had become not just her lawyer but her friend. Good morning, Sarah said. I'm Petty Officer First Class Sarah Chen. I'm going to teach you how to keep your teammates alive when everything goes to hell. And I'm going to start by telling you about the worst 8 months of my life. The candidates shifted uncomfortably. I spent 8 months homeless, living under a bridge, begging for change, getting moved along by cops. And I learned something important I'm going to pass on to you. She paused, making eye contact with each candidate. You never know who the person in front of you really is. That homeless veteran might be the same person who saved lives in Fallujah. That quiet janitor might be a former operator. That broken-looking person might be exactly the hero you need when everything falls apart. One candidate raised his hand. Ma'am, is it true you stopped a shooting while homeless? I stopped a murder, Sarah corrected. Because I was trained to recognize threats and respond, regardless of personal circumstances. Your training doesn't stop because your life falls apart. Your oath doesn't expire because the system fails you. She pulled up a photo. Amanda Morrison with her daughters. This woman and her children are alive because I happened to be in the right place. Not because I was trying to be a hero, but because even when I was invisible, even when I was broken, I was still a combat medic. And combat medics save lives. That's what we do. The class that followed was unlike any before. Sarah didn't just teach tourniquets and chest wounds. She taught resilience, maintaining skills when everything else falls apart, being the person who acts when everyone freezes. She taught that being a SEAL wasn't just about uniform or trident or missions. It was about carrying those values forward, even when nobody was watching, even when you had every reason to give up. She taught what it meant to be invisible and still choose to matter. 1 year later, Sarah visited the corner outside Union Station where she'd spent so many mornings. The corner looked different now. Someone had painted a memorial on the wall. A Navy SEAL trident with "Never Invisible" beneath it. Flowers. A note. Thank you for your service. All of it. Sarah stood there, remembering what it felt like to be dismissed, ignored, moved along. The memory was painful but distant now. A young homeless man approached cautiously, recognizing her from news coverage. Mrs. Chen, I'm sorry to bother you, but I'm a veteran having trouble with my VA claim, and I thought maybe. Sarah pulled out her phone. What's your name? Rodriguez. Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez, Army. 2 tours in Afghanistan. Okay, Marcus, here's my direct number, and here's Amanda Morrison's number. You call both of us, and we're going to make sure you don't end up where I was. Understood. The young man's eyes filled with tears. I don't know how to thank you. You don't thank me. You get your benefits, get back on your feet, then you help the next person. That's how we fix this, one veteran at a time. As Marcus walked away with hope replacing despair, Sarah understood something profound. She hadn't just survived those 8 months. She'd learned from them. She'd become someone who would never walk past a person in need without seeing them. The cardboard sign was gone, thrown away months ago, but the word stayed with her. Homeless vet. Anything helps. God bless. She'd needed help. People had helped. And now she was helping others. That was the only ending that mattered. Sometimes the most important victories aren't won on battlefields or in congressional hearings. Sometimes they're won on street corners. One act of visibility at a time, by people who refuse to let anyone else become invisible. Sarah Chen had been invisible, but she'd never stopped seeing, and that made all the difference. So I ask you, Have you ever met someone like Sarah? Someone who served, who never asked for praise, but who changed lives anyway? Write their name in the comments. Tell us how they lived. Say the things they never would, because they deserve to be remembered. And if this story touched you, subscribe. We're here to make sure people like Sarah are never invisible again. Their silence was earned. Now it's time we speak for them. Where are you watching from? Drop your city below. We'll see you in the next story. And until then, if you see someone quietly struggling, don't walk past, because you might be standing next to a hero who just needs someone to finally see them.